Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our special council meeting on November 15th, 2023. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Starting off with the second thing, the land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional lands of Acadia First Nations, part of Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Council, you all have your agenda in front of you. Is there any additions to the agenda? Has circulated? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Patty Durkee, seconded by Councillor Daniel Allen to approve the agenda as circulated. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Item 4, new business 4.1, the second reading of the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. You have in front of you the documents 4.1.1, the draft municipal planning strategy, and 4.1.2, the draft land use bylaw. What is council's pleasure? Deputy Warden Trevor Cunningham, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, before we begin, I think last night's session was really useful. We heard from a lot of people, a lot of diversity of views. General themes were protection of the environment, which I think we've done a lot of in the new dock. The other sort of view is, property rights, and that's very important as well. So the two pieces are reflected, have been reflected on a lot. But I guess in terms of the process, we've talked about it going on, and there can always be more consultation. I guess that's a decision we'll have to make today. But what I'd ask is, through the chair, perhaps if we don't go to second reading, approve second reading today, I'd like the other councillors to share what the specific next steps might be. We've spent a considerable amount of money on the consult. What are people thinking about in terms of additional spending for consultation, a plan? I'm not asking staff, because I think what happened is the community asked us to talk about this. So are there any alternative ways forward that councillors know of?
Does any councillor have any comment on that?
I'll speak.
Go ahead, Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And last night was informative, and it addressed, issues for the most part, I believe that we have thought about through the process. And we do have some questions for today, but specifically to Deputy Warden's question, at the last meeting, I voted no because I felt, for two reasons. Number one was the removal of the sensitive environment piece, and if you're for less rules, I'm probably on the opposing side for that, because I represent Chibouque and Rockville, and I seen that as a detriment to my community. So I was for the increase in sensitive environment. And the second reason was I felt like one more community meeting would have been okay at the time. I do feel like, after hearing last night's comments, that we've addressed some of those issues, and there could be questions still to be addressed, but I'm not sure that I know what the next step is, if it's additional community meetings, if it is having Upland return for additional meetings. But I want to address the questions and then decide if it's a yay or a nay. And then if it's a nay, then we would figure out what to do from there.
Any other councillors have any comments?
Chair,
Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
Are there any substantive changes that any councillor knows of from during the consult last night? Was there anything introduced that would be substantive in nature? I think that's the important piece. If there's something that we've identified that's substantive, I think that's the language our planners are using, or really important, that we might change, that we might have a reasonable probability of changing, that we could get agreement around the council table. Are there any of those pieces? I'm not aware of any.
Councillor Sherry Hurlbert, then I'll go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy Warden. One of the things that, heard many things last night. one of the things and I know Deputy Warden's question was, what do we as council? But one of the things for me was around Big Pond. And I would like to hear from staff, and I guess first of all, is this cutting into my 5 minutes?
No.
Okay. So if we could hear from staff on Big Pond and the sensitive environment around that, and some explanation on why we're doing what we're doing or why we're not doing something, that might be helpful. I'm not sure if we just make the motion one way or the other and have the discussion like we normally do. I feel that's the best way. I think someone just needs to make the motion one way or the other, and then we continue to have this discussion with our 5-minute rules in place. But for me, if I'm allowed to, ask the question, it would be around Big Pond and why we are doing what we're doing, or why we're not doing what people think we should be doing.
You can if you wish, then I'll go.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Councillor Hurlbert. So, yeah, the Big Pond issue has come up, I think, throughout the course of this project, and in thinking of it, there are some, fairly substantial changes in the documents. Broad, because I think it's important that these planning documents don't, it's not the focus isn't on one property or one person, or that's it's neither fair nor good planning. If you want to look at it as a big picture of what are we generally okay with. So the draft documents have a number of changes around aquaculture generally, strengthening the language around closed containment, requiring a more clear application process with more thorough information to give council the information and the public the information they need to consider any aquaculture application. There's also, it's important to note, it's not an easy process. Aquaculture is only permitted in industrial zones, so there would need to either be a pre-existing industrial zone or a rezoning first to do that, and then there's a development agreement process. So that's two checks and balances along the way that the council and the community would have an ability to look at a proposal and review it thoroughly. So that there are those checks and balances already built in to these drafts. There's been the broader comment about the sensitive environment zone, and that was one. We did the zone was originally called the coastal wetland zone. It applied just to coastal wetlands. We renamed it to allow it to be broadened, and we did broaden the use of that zone to things like beaches and coastal cliffs. But again, the whole thing is having a methodology and being having a good rationale for what we do. And our rationale was to use the forestry layer, the land classification data from the province, and choose broad categories, not to focus on one property here or there. And so we have the categories we have, and there was a discussion at PAC to expand it to further categories, which is a valid approach. But I think as council felt at the time when we discussed this previously, it was late in the game, and that it was going to affect a number of properties, but potentially late in the game where people didn't have a chance to review the impacts and what it would mean for their land. So our recommendation at the time was to, pull it out for now, and that's something you can return to as a council. It doesn't change the conditions on the ground today. The current bylaw, we're going further than the current bylaw already, and you can come back in a future project, do the proper engagement that's needed on that specific topic. And I don't think it would be appropriate to call out one property, the one inland wetland to apply this zone to, without looking at it a broader picture.
Madam CAO, you had a comment?
Just for clarification, Councillor Hurlbert, so was your question more broad with respect to the way Mr. Watson answered it, or were you wanting to have a specific question answered with respect to a pending application?
That, I think both. I knew that there was a pending application, so I think that, Mr. Watson's explanation of why we are where we are, and the broad view, and knowing that we've already said, no, we're not going to increase the sensitive, environment zones to specific areas. But I do know there is a pending application, so if this Madam CAO could speak to that, and maybe folks would understand why we're doing what we're doing.
Sure,
Right.
sure, yeah. So there definitely, excuse me, is some concern around the wetland known as Big Pond. And so an application was received, Mr. Chair, through you to Councilor Herbert in September of 2021, which specified 14 property identification numbers to be included in their application to rezone to what is called under the existing planning documents, the coastal wetlands. Our office corresponded with the applicant and advised them that in order for the applicant to apply to rezone 14 PIDs that the applicant does not own, the applicant had to have signed assignment of agent forms from the owners of the PIDs, which would be under consideration for rezoning. And that letter went back out just 10 days later to the applicant, which was September 17th, 2021. And as of today, no assignment of agent forms have been received, so the application cannot move through the process until that happens.
Okay, thank you.
All right, my turn. What I want is substantive changes, and I've been very consistent from the very beginning of this process, or sorry, not from the beginning, but when we had the first drafts till now, and that hasn't changed. My biggest issue that I see is in regards to the sensitive environment zone. The way that the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw sat 10 years ago, we had checks and balances in there, allowed uses and allowed zones. And then the Big Pond issue came up. Well, I'm going to ask each and every one of you, did it work? Yes, it did. That use is not allowed in that zone, and on top of that, that area or that PID number was not even zoned, so we would have had to gone through it twice. And what we have here with the sensitive environment zone is another layer of bureaucracy, as far as I'm concerned. And we did hear that theme last night: too many regulations. Our current bylaws do work. They do. And on top of that, there's also an application, as the CAO just mentioned, that they want to rezone that to a different zone. Absolutely. Absolutely, we can do that. And that would be put in the power of the people that own the PID numbers and pay the taxes on that land, whether they'd want to do it or not. That's the way that I see it. I'm one of those people that I own a fair amount of land. I think that I pay the taxes on my land. I think I should have the peaceful enjoyment. And if I choose, I could get it rezoned to that. Another thing that's a little bothersome to me that I didn't catch it right away in regards to notifications on rezoning or allowed uses or something like that. It used to be, I think it was 50 PID numbers out to X amount of kilometers. Well, that's reduced. It's reduced in the new document. I don't think that's right. Yes, we've heard people say, well, it's nowhere near me. Why did I get this letter? Well, at least you got it. If you don't like it, then toss it, or if you have no interest in talking about it, take that notification, throw it in the garbage. Don't matter to me, but at least you were notified. And we did hear that theme last night as well, notifications. That's something that we've got to work on, and we all know it. It was talked about in a previous committee of the whole, I believe, and I can't remember exactly when, but we talked about it in staff. If I remember correctly, there was a plan for staff to look into that, how we can better engage the public on things like this. But the fact of the matter is the way it sits now, for me, I cannot, in my mind, I cannot support it because there'd be substantive changes. And I think if we're going to have to do that, it's going to have to go back to a committee of the whole, and we're going to have to hash it out. And I think we're split on this. I know what I said to some people is going to be unpopular, and I know some people what I said is popular. But at the end of the day, the old plan worked. in regards to Big Pond. It did work. It's not going there. There's no new applications to have it there. And I understand people's wants to make sure that they want a little more protection on it, but that would be up to the people that own the land or the PID number or PIDs. In my opinion, it worked. And I don't think that we need an extra layer of bureaucracy, as some people would call it. Those are my statements. I've been very consistent through this whole process. I do realize that we are a democracy. You can't get everything you want. But at the end of the day, this is a living document. Down the road, if we see that something doesn't work, we can certainly reopen it. And we've done it several times just in this past term. Councillor Warren Cushing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. The subject of Big Pond keeps coming up. We've dealt with it. We've had it explain what we're going to do with it. As far as I'm concerned, it's not an issue anymore. But there's a lot of other issues that are out there that residents last night and before last night brought to our attention, which I think we should take a chance or take some time to look at them and to see how we can add them to our bylaws and update our bylaws to that. But our bylaws, they're reviewed every 10 years. However, I can remember back in the 80s when the new sewer and water system come down through Dayton, and Mr. Moore's Mountain Beauty Shop, he was planning his retirement, and he built himself a campground for his retirement. He planted trees and whatnot and had places all staked out for it, and gonna plan on putting a septic system in and whatnot. But our bylaws stopped him from doing that. He had to put a pumping station up to connect to the sewer lines. So that's back in the 80s. And if you go up by where the sign of the whale used to be, you see all those trees down in there that are growing along Doctor's Lake. That's where it was. So the bylaws have been in place for many, many years. And all of a sudden today, now we're looking at trying to get rid of them. We have to have bylaws, number one. But I do think that we have to look at how we can address some of the issues that have been brought to our attention. That's all I'll say for now. Thank you, John.
Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. One of the issues last night was about consultation, and I know that we've been working on this for 2 years. One of the questions I have, through you to our CAO, please, was the consultation process included in newsletters that went out to every resident?
Yes, so during the piece of the process where the PAC owned the process, the Planning Advisory Committee owned the process, there were 2 significant chunks of engagement. And at both of those times, including other forms of notification, was notification in the newsletters.
Okay, so those newsletters go to every resident. So the process was then everybody would have received that information.
At least that.
Okay, yeah, beyond, yes, I know, there's lots of other information, thank you. And the other question I have is, we've had planning and zoning since probably the late 70s. And I know the province is saying now, because there are areas that do not have it, and that everyone now has to have MPS, LUB, everyone. And so, have there been issues with regards to restrictions on development over the past 10 years? Like, I know that I've been on council for 7 years, and we had some discussions at the very beginning about concerns with development. Has that, or was that original LUB MPS from the past 10 years, Have people complained about that? Have people been able to do basically what they've been wanting to do? And noting that the new one that we're working on right now has fewer restrictions. So have there been issues with what we've had all along?
So, Mr. Chair, I can start, and then anybody from the development office team who's here can chime in, everybody from that team. What I'll share with you about the last 5.5 or 6 years is that other than an application for land-based aquaculture, which required a rezoning and was put through the rigors of the process, and council made a decision on that, I'm not aware of any project that could not go forward. There are some landowners who work with our development office to try to understand language with respect to accessory buildings and main buildings and all those sorts of things. But the team is there to help those landowners understand the language and figure out how a project can go forward. And so sometimes when the Planning Advisory Committee receives reports from the planner or the development officer, it provides for that kind of order of operations approach to understand how a project could go forward. And the instructions council have given staff in the last 6 years have been to use the documents to enable projects, not to prevent projects. And so when something does finally come to the Planning Advisory Committee and council, it's because at the staff level and the technical level, we don't have a mechanism to allow the project, and so we bring recommendations to the Planning Advisory Committee, who then makes a recommendation to council about a way it could go forward, or a way that council might have to make a change. So that's kind of what's been happening.
Thank you for explaining that.
So I've been working as a development officer for the municipality since the spring, and in that time, I would say the only developments that we've looked at that have been unable to move forward as easily as the applicant would have liked have been for accessory dwellings and multi-unit housing. Both of these have been addressed in this new land use bylaw to allow to permit those uses more easily. Accessory dwellings specifically, I've gotten quite a few inquiries about, and the old process required a plan of subdivision be submitted and approved but not registered to show that the land could later be subdivided into multiple lots. And that process can be onerous to landowners who just want to put a small accessory dwelling on their lot. So as far as developments that haven't gone through, I can think of one additional rezoning, and that was just that neighboring properties were against it. That was to allow a commercial use in Pleasant Lake for an aesthetic spa. But aside from that, everything, we've found a way to do it. There's been some variance requests which allow buildings to be closer to lot lines and other specific requirements to be reduced to allow a building to be put maybe in a slightly different location than would normally be allowed. We've been able to do these. However, this document creates a much clearer process for that I think will help expedite that process and make it easier on the applicants overall.
So I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm the planner for the municipality, and I apologize, I'm losing my voice. But I've been in this role for almost 3 years now, come January. And I'm the person who gets called in when there is difficulty. So when an applicant comes in and for whatever reason, if Derek is unable to process the application because what they're interested in doing doesn't quite fit with what's in the rules or it wasn't anticipated, So I just wanted to say that I'm not that process when something is a no right now does not necessarily mean that it's not going to happen. I get called in, I sit down with an applicant, we look at what the issues and the restrictions are. We always provide the applicant an opportunity to discuss exactly what the rules are and what the issues are and how their development may change to fit in the rules. But they also, it is absolutely within their right to apply for an amendment and to go through the process with the Planning Advisory Committee and bring it to council and to notify their neighbors. And that would go through a public hearing process very similar to what we did last night. So I do just want to say that my approach has always been to be enabling and to support and to give as many options as possible to those who do come my way. I have not had an application of anybody that has had an issue in almost 6 months. So I haven't been used very much. But when it has happened, as Derek stated, it's either not moved through because neighbors were notified and they weren't interested in having that application happen, or it has moved through because they were excited and interested in what we were considering.
I remember a couple instances over the years that I've been sitting on council meeting. Deputy Warden's been here for 15 now. I remember the crematorium. That was, and I do believe Councillor Durkee, you were there. You remember that there was a lot of public input, and it was actually quite difficult for the business, which it ultimately did go there, just not far from here. The crematorium was one. I'm trying to think of another. It was on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. But at the end of the day, pardon me? Yeah, Eel Farm was another one. In regards to in our business park, that was another one. That was quite difficult, but the process did work. Deputy Warden?
I think last night, and I'm prepared to make a motion, but I think last night Ann Jones brought up a good point. She talked about the dark skies, and should make the point that without the previous bylaw didn't protect the dark skies to the extent that the new one does. So delaying the new legislation and the new MPS and LUB, people have said they wanted that. That adds additional risk to the dark skies. So people can build properties and shine lights all over the place. So, and people can agree or disagree with that, but that's what we've heard from the community. Lots of this started with the salmon farm application, the aquaculture application, and I believe a lot of the environmental regulation, should lie with the province. We generally don't have the staff or the ability to really enforce those things. But having said that, a lot of people want additional protections. That's pretty clear. And given that, there have been changes in the MPS and LUB, and this isn't all about my views, it's about the community's views. That's what we went out. We went out and sought the community's views, and they're reflected in the new document. So again, there are going to be some disagreements, about this. We heard a diversity of views last night. Some people want, really want to focus on landowners' rights, and I think those are tremendously important. Many others want additional protections, including, the additional sensitive environment piece. Really, that wasn't a recommendation to expand that beyond the coastal piece at PAC. PAC made the motion, it came to council. Council moved that back. So I think that's a lot of those pieces have been talked about. So given all that, and and given that it's a living document, and given that we can revisit many of the pieces over time, but there's some that's changed. The previous document was 155 pages. I think this one's 160. So largely it's the same, with some substantial changes that the community asked for, including environmental protections, and they're in there. And we've heard and listened, and I think we've gone through the process at PAC, and it's been around the council table for a few months now too. And so we could hear from some additional folks, no doubt about that. I'm just not clear about that process and how much more money we'd spend at this time. I'm not so sure there's the appetite to spend another $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to consult additional. That's the downside. More is always better, but more always costs more money. And we may not end up anywhere further ahead either, so that's not a guarantee. So given that, I'll move the Municipality District of Yarmouth pass second reading of the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaws
Quiet, please.
circulated.
Do I have a seconder on that motion on the floor? Seconded by Councillor Daniel Allen. Remember, council, I'm going to be following the, you can speak twice for 5 minutes each. So who wishes to speak first? Councillor Patty Durkee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the concerns last night was about people owning property and being able to put roads on their property. What I would like is for some clarification for folks to say, are you allowed to put your road wherever you want to? Are you, do you have to have an engineered road? And if you do, why do you have to have that? And so I would like that explained to folks so that they have a better understanding of how and why that works, or why that's included.
Ian, you want to take that one?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Durkee. Road development is primarily governed by the subdivision bylaw, which we're not touching through this process. And that sets out the standards for, you know, what level of construction is needed. I believe it's 5 lots, so there's an exemption in there. You can do up to 5 lots with no construction standards to allow those small subdivisions to have a son or a daughter or a family member get a lot, or even sell a couple off to fund your retirement or whatever. Once you go beyond those 5, there's basic construction standards for private roads. You know, and that's really, once you have a number of houses on a road, you start to worry about emergency access. How are we going to get building materials in there? All those kinds of things. Basically, ensuring that people who buy those lots can access their property safely and long term, and make it easy to maintain. The big change in this document is that new private roads would not be considered in serviced areas. Still permitted in rural areas, still permitted in hamlets, but in the serviced communities, the big change is existing private roads only, or new public roads. And that's just, you know, within those areas, it's reasonable for the municipality to take them over, to maintain them, to have them be public roads. You don't want necessarily public roads in far-flung areas, but in the serviced communities of Dayton, Hebron, like, that's great. The municipality has them already and has the ability to maintain those. And in those cases, you know, there are real advantages to public roads versus private. But in the rural areas, the hamlets, nothing's changed in that regard. You still have the 5 lots where you don't need standards, and even beyond that, you can have a private road in those areas for sure.
Just follow up if I may. So the private, so if, because this is where I found there was some confusion. If someone has developed 5 lots in the front of their property and they want to go to the back of their property, do they have to have an engineered road at that point, or can they just like do a private road in order to have that developed?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it need to be a private road, but there's standards for it in terms of minimum width. You know,
Once the five on the front have road access.
right. Yeah, that's right. If they're accessing off the public road or something like that. Like, it's when there's 5 lots using that road, more than 5 lots using that travel way or that private road
Yes.
as their main access. Once you go over that, that's when you need that higher standard. It's still a private road. It's not built to public standards with asphalt and all that. It can be a gravel surface. It's just, you know, minimum thickness, minimum width, making sure that it's a level that can support emergency access and all that.
Right, but if you're not developing and it's for your own private use, you can just go ahead and put your road in and so be it.
Yeah, it would be
correct?
a driveway at that point.
It's a
not-
direct-
it's
thank
not
you
a
very
road.
much.
Yeah, it's a subtle difference, but yeah, it's a driveway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I apologize to my colleagues that I don't have the mics that flash and it doesn't tell me who's in order. I think I seen Councillor Hilton. Did you put your hand up or not? Oh, but I did see Councillor Lauren Cushion first, and then Councillor Nick. Go ahead, you have the floor, Councillor. Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to the rest of the council. I can understand of what Patty alluded to on the construction of private roads and whatnot. And we definitely, I know it's in the subdivision act or anything, but however, we do not want to run into a problem like we ran into for the residents on Green Rock Drive. They had a road that was built for specifications, and then the owner of the subdivision decided he wasn't going to finish his part of it, and that just, it's a horrible road, private road, that's it. So I'm not saying that we have to go to Nova Scotia standards of road, but we should definitely have some type of standard, because from what we heard last night, to build a Nova Scotia standard road is going to cost between anywhere from $400,000 and up for 3/4 of a mile. So that's a large sum of money for a developer to pay for, and if that developer is going to sell the house lots, of course the house lots are going to have to what's the word I'm looking for? Have to represent the cost of that road, so it's going to drive it up, and we are concerned about housing development, and this is one instant that we have to, that is discouraging people to build new homes. And since COVID, times have changed, and maybe we have to lighten up on some of our restrictions in order to encourage people to build and to look after the homeless people that are out there. So it's very important for us to consider a lot of these concerns that were brought up last night. Thank you.
I do believe Councillor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to kind of address some of the questions that were brought up last night. You know, I personally do believe in the rights of landowners, but I also believe that we have a responsibility to be a good neighbor, and that everyone deserves, you know, some level of peace and quiet in their own home. And I do believe that planning plays a big role in that. You know, saying that it has been a 2-year, or more than that if you were part of the salmon farm conversations around the land use bylaws, and representing Chebogue and Rockville, you know, I feel very caught in the middle of what's over governance and what is allowing people to have the rights to their own lands, because this is the document that we use the language from this document to keep the salmon farm out of Chebogue. So I really struggle knowing which way is right or up and down. So I just want to ask the planners a couple questions about the aquaculture, the wording. Last night there was 2 statements that I just wanted clarified. In your opinion, is it full RAS? Like, does it say full RAS? Because I feel like the conversations from PAC and the motion from council was for full recirculating systems. And do the words open flow still exist in any form?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hilton. So the words open flow exist in the municipal planning strategy in the context section to contrast, you know, as a backgrounder on contrasting the 2 systems that, you know, there's kind of 2 approaches to aquaculture. One is open, one is closed. On the policy side of things, it's requiring the closed, if that makes sense.
You know, we talked about the Big Pond application, and not talking specifically about that. I guess this question might be for the CAO. You know, it's due to be talked about at the next council meeting, but does that mean we're going to go back to the old, what we told them the first time, that if they don't present 14 letters, then we're not going to consider it? Because through this process, we could have considered it.
There, excuse me, there is language in the Municipal Government Act that does enable council to rezone properties by way of motion. council can do that. They have the power to do that. So there are 14 PIDs included in what's known as Big Pond, and council can rezone them by way of motion. It can happen. There is a pending application. There's correspondence to and from the applicant under the process that was in place at that time. If an owner of a PID taken in by Big Pond took issue with a motion of council to rezone, the correspondence would have to be made available in any inquiry that they might make. And I would suggest that the correspondence that council is going to consider later this month be taken in light of an open application, and council consider direction to staff with respect to the applicant and clarifying where they stand now, where they want to go, because it is 2021, the date on that application, and a lot has changed. So probably the wisest course of action will be for staff to re-engage the applicant and give them an opportunity to reframe their application, withdraw their application, renew their application, and go from there, so that council and the Planning Advisory Committee are dealing with more current and up-to-date information.
Thank you. And just back to staff, you know, the salmon farm conversation has led a lot to a lot of people being here today, and a lot of conversations of council. In your mind, is this is the language strong enough to restrict closed containment for finfish agriculture? And as I asked this morning, can you explain the difference between that and what is allowed for a lobster pound?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hilton. So, to be able to consider any aquaculture system would first require rezoning and then a development agreement. And through that development agreement process, you know, council would need to satisfy themselves that, you know, the impacts aren't there. And so the barrier, the threshold for someone to convince you is fairly high. And, you know, who knows, maybe someone comes up with some wonder system that can do it with zero impacts, and then in that case, you might want to approve it. But the checks and balances are there to allow you to have that thorough look, and to turn it down if there's any fear of impacts. It's just as was said earlier today, you know, the existing plan worked to allow a thorough review of the previous proposal, and I think these drafts only strengthen that. The draft land use bylaw does treat lobster pounds differently. They are considered under, I believe, marine industrial, is it? So it's a standalone, or it's a separate use from aquaculture. It's a broad category. Marine industrial allows things like boat repair, lobster pounds, that kind of thing. And it's as of right use in a lot of zones, recognizing the importance of the fishing industry to this region.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll just keep going if the rest of my 5 minutes is up.
You got a couple more.
Okay. Thank you. You know, lots of conversations around, and I'm gonna, you know, for the most part, I enjoy living in the community I live in because of some of the restrictions that exist in that community. And I have I share with my parents a cottage on a lake that isn't affected by, you know, blue-green algae or other things like that. So when we started the conversations around the protection of the environment through the use of restrictions around RVs, you know, that was the way that we could manage some of the impacts of overpopulation around lakes. So that's pretty much where the allowance for 2 RVs came from. And if you wanted more than that, then you needed things like an approved septic system. And at the same time, I've knocked on 100 doors this week, and at least 5 of them are RVs that people are living in because it's all that they could afford to live in. So I really struggle with finding that balance between what we require and what people can afford. Just on the question to the planners, around RV use, not so much around our lake, around RVs around lakes, but is there a time limit on how long someone can live in an RV?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the existing bylaw has a 60-day limit. The new one does not. It's really hard to enforce, as you know that you got to have the enforcement officer go out one day and prove that they're there 60 days later, and that's really hard to do. So it's a pain in the behind. But also, as you know, more big picture, as you mentioned, people live in them, and we don't want to be saying you only get 60 days, because that is the reality for some people. And so that is actually a really big change in this document, is removing that limitation.
And to be honest, I'm not sure I knew the answer to that, so thank you for that. And you know, the other thing was the use of shipping containers for dwellings, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually do allow shipping containers to be used for housing. They just need to be treated the same way you would building a home. So it has to meet building codes, but you can use as many shipping containers as you like, as long as they're incorporated into a structure for the purpose of living in.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. There's nothing in here that prevents it. You know, it's you got to meet code. We can't get around that through this document. Building code's a separate issue, but if you can meet code, it's a building, and it's not a shipping container anymore, and you can live in it.
Yes, and as much as
Counselor, your time is.
you got to minus his time.
I was working.
Make it.
Okay.
Come back around.
I can come back around. You can
Yeah,
speak
sure.
twice.
Thanks.
Counselor Patty Durkee.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hilton, for bringing those things forward, because they were some of my questions as well. And I think some information that the public needs to know, that if we don't approve the updated MPS, then we still work from the present day MPS LUB. So there are actually more restrictions on the one that exists, and if we don't change those, then that stays. So we still have an MPS LUB. It's not like it's ever wiped out and we start from scratch all over again. That doesn't happen. We still have to work from what we have, and I think it's really important that people have to understand that. The other issue I have, or concern, is that we have addressed some of the issues brought forward through letters that people have sent to us. And so there are no restrictions on how many people you can have in your home. There are no restrictions with regards to having 4-H or knitting circles or any, that's none of our business. You know, if you want to have a party, you have a party. When it becomes an issue is if it's runs till 2 o'clock in the morning and your neighbors are upset because you're really loud. But we took that out. There was a lot of misinterpretation in the line that basically said you do not need any type of permit for that, which was what was in there, but people misinterpreted and thought that they did. But no, so that's been taken out, and I think that's really important for people to understand. And in terms of the whole building inspector issue, the building inspector issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, is something that is law, and it comes from building code, and people to follow up on whether people are following the building code, which is safety, and that's provincial. And so that we can't change that. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the part about inspection, that does come directly from the Municipal Government Act.
Yes.
It is a provincial law, and we've included in this document partly because we want to be transparent about that. We want people to know that that's there. We don't want to hide it, because it's one thing, you know, we've heard a lot of complaints about 160 pages. It's a whole other to have to go into the Municipal Government Act. You know, we want to make sure that people know that that's there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next one is Councillor Daniel Allen, and Councillor Cushing, then Councillor Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. my colleagues have made great points. I want to be clear that I'm here to vote on a document that is really just an updated version of the same document that's been in place for the last 10 years, which was probably updated 10 years ago from the 10 years before. There have been some changes in it. It's not going to be a perfect document. That's why, for me, I'm glad it's a living document, and we can, if we have issues arise, we can revisit, we can make changes. Nothing is set in stone. Last night I heard a lot of communication issues. I think as we move forward as a council, that's definitely something that we have to look at, our way of getting our word out, our way of making sure everyone knows what's going on. Social media today doesn't stop anything, I can tell you. It makes things go, it goes from 0 to 900 in a millisecond. So, you know, there's no reason that our communication can't get out to the people. That should be definitely getting done. To Councillor Durkee's point, the bylaw enforcement officer issue that was mentioned last night, and I don't like using anybody's names, but about a bylaw enforcement officer just being able to show up on your doorstep and having access to your home. How long is that actual, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, how long has that actually been a bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Allen. So that's straight from the Municipal Government Act. The Municipal Government Act was an update of the Planning Act 1996, so at least 27 years. I never worked with the Planning Act, so I can't speak to whether that was in the Planning Act previously, but it's been in the Municipal Government Act for 27 years.
And through this new document, again, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, so through this new document, we've actually made changes to that we have to give notice, 24-hour notice, is that correct?
We've clarified that we need to give that 24-hour notice. We've made it very clear that we've always had to give that 24-hour notice if we were to enter a dwelling. And we have to have the permission of the property owner. If you give that notice, you show up, if the property owner says, no, you may not come in, then you have to go get a judge's order to do so. That's always been in the Act. We're just clarifying that. We want to be transparent about it, and we've included that language in the document to be transparent about it.
And the same person mentioned the fact that, you know, they would want to know, like, why or who made a complaint, or what would bring that development officer to their doorstep. And there's a process for that as well, if I'm correct. And I mean, there has to be. Our development officer is not just going to show up on somebody's doorstep out of the blue without some type of formal complaints or formal. So, I mean, really, unless you're really doing something wrong, you're never going to see them.
So, quiet, please.
Yeah, you go that.
So I think it's important, Mr. Chair, through you to council, to understand that Section 267 of the Municipal Government Act is in the planning section, and it's from a subsection in there all around offenses. And if a complaint is received or somebody is non-compliant with regulation. So the context is exactly that, around council has received a complaint that there's a problem, or the development officer or a building official has observed that there's something non-compliant. It's contrary, and municipalities in Nova Scotia have to be able to investigate those.
Okay. Well, I'm good for now. I guess I get a second chance if I want to come back around. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next on my list is Councillor Lauren Cushing. You have the
Mr.
floor.
Warden, you, the rest of the council and staff. There was a lot of misunderstanding of the bylaws that we presently have in place and where we're going forward with the new ones. Citizens were very concerned about not allowing a bylaw officer to just come knocking on your door without any prior notice. So that was really misunderstood by the public, and unfortunately, it was, you know, people got very upset about that, and I don't blame them if that was the case, but that's not the case. We have to give a 24-hour notice, as Councillor Allen had clarified through our staff. My other concern, the topic of the sea cans containers for private property, limited number, and is questionable. However, again, how do we develop a bylaw that addresses sea cans from become derelict over a number of years? You know, they're made of steel, they're gonna rust out and whatnot, and, you know, we gotta have some type of timeline there, or some type of maintenance requirements that the property owners who own these sea cans have to keep them up to a good standard and not become a derelict item. You could run a small business out of them, as one of the citizens last night said, but, you know, if, for example, if that small business owner decide that he doesn't want to do a business anymore, he or she doesn't want to do a business anymore, what happens to the sea cans? Are they left there to rust out? They have to be moved. Who's going to pay for it? And this kind of stuff like this. So this is, you know, allowing sea cans, I have not a big problem with. I have a big problem with how are they going to be maintained over a number of years. So, thank you.
Councillor Sherry Hurlbert, then myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We, as a municipality, have to have rules and regulations. And what I've heard loud and clear over the last 6 months-ish is that we have people who want limited rules and limited regulations. And I've also heard that we have people who want more rules and more regulations. And then last night I heard there are people who want more rules, but then they also want less rules. So I'm not sure how we balance that. What I did do is I asked myself last night, and I wrote down some questions. Was this process thorough? Was the community involved? Did we listen to the concerns during and after the publication of the document in March? Did we take those concerns under consideration? Did we act on those concerns? And if I can answer yes to those questions, I've done the best that I can do today. I didn't come into this room to make a vote that was either going to get me elected or re-elected or not. Wasn't even part of what my thought process was. I am here today to make a decision for what I feel is best for the municipality of the District of Yarmouth, for everyone. I have repeated calls, and I welcome calls. I actually feel like I haven't gotten many calls even about this. We have a lot of chatter. We have a lot of people in the community talking, but I'm not sure if I've had more than 10 people reach out to me and have a conversation about some of these things. I welcome those conversations, but I will tell you around this table that you know that we have people who call us about chickens on their property. We have people call us because there's blue-green algae in their lake. We have people call us because people are living in trailers. And to that one person, I said, that's what those people probably can afford. And this new bylaw allows them to live in that trailer. We have people calling us because they don't want certain developments in their areas. We have people call us to tell us that they have, you know, that they have all of these concerns of things that they don't want happening in their backyard. We have rules in place to prevent most of these things from happening. And if we can look at the rules, and I think, you know, Mr. Watson said, in a broad sense, is this document perfect? No. Are there some things in the next 6 months that I would like to, you know, make some motions to look at changing? Yes. But as a whole, we have reduced restrictions. I have listened to those people I think we have done the best that we can do. We have made changes, and other people have mentioned them. I'm going to mention them again because last night I heard people talking about we can only have one person in our home to teach. False. We've made those changes. We have made changes to restrictions, to reduce restrictions of shipping containers in the airport noise reduction zone from someone who said they didn't know anything about this process. We changed that because they reached out and had a concern. And last night they stood here and said they didn't know about this process. And I have to call that out because that's wrong. The information that
Quiet,
we
please.
have, doesn't bother me. The information we have
Quiet, please.
has reduced restrictions. Before this was in place, if there was someone killing a pig or a chicken or a cow in their backyard, a bylaw enforcement officer could have gone in and said, no, you can't do that. We heard from the farming community. We are allowing that to now happen. We never, to my knowledge, have sent someone out to say, no, you can't kill that pig in your backyard. But now we have language in place that says you can. We've reduced that restriction. The list goes on. We talked about the development officer. That has to be there for a reason. Part of the municipal planning strategy. We've just made it clear. I feel like there is still a lot of misinformation out there, but today I have to do what I feel is best moving forward. Again, not perfect, but I have to do what's best for this municipality and also for those residents who want more rules, who want to feel safe in their community, who want to feel safe on their property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to go next, and this is going to be a question to you, Ian. It's in regards to the airport noise reduction zone in the CCANs. There was a change in there. Please correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to be allowing the use of an unlimited amount of CCANs on the southeast side of the it'd be northeast side of the property. However, we do have airport noise reduction zone as a crow flies southwest. Why are we? One thing that really bothers me about this process, CCANs weren't talked about, and all of a sudden, bang! It come up out of the blue, and now we're allowing an unlimited amount of use of, or an unlimited number of CCANs in a certain area of an airport noise reduction zone. Why doesn't it include all of it? And to me, that was something that was rushed, put in for, it was rushed in there, and it really never had no public consultation at the beginning because we never really heard that much about it. But all of a sudden, someone decided that they wanted to have that added, and it only included one small corner of the airport noise reduction zone, or one part of it. Why didn't it include all of it? Public participation. I'm going to echo some of my other councillors' response to that. We've got to do better. We really have to do better. Throughout the years, I've tried to get people engaged. The council's looking at this. The council's looking at that bylaw. The council's looking to amend something. Oh, I don't care. That's what I hear 90% of the time. I really don't. Or they don't care until they find out it may affect them. That's what I have a problem with. The CCANs is something that really bothers me. That has not gone through a public consultation process. That was added in. As Councillor Hurlbert stated, we received several calls about different things, about allowed uses. So-and-so is doing this. We have 20 ornamental geese running up by the school. There's travel trailers being used as permanent residents, and they have no sewer pickup, or no sewer lines or access to any sewer, and they've been living there for a year. It's hard. This is got to be one of the hardest jobs, planning, that I can say that's in municipal government. It really is. No document is perfect. No document is going to address everything. This whole document can be opened up, but as the reasons I stated before, and I've been consistent all the way through, I can't swallow it. And I'm not saying that because I want to get reelected or anything like that. I really don't care. People decide. If they don't want me there, so be it. But I do the best that I can while I'm here. I had asked a question about CCANs in the airport noise reduction zone, and I gave a little bit of preamble. So that CCANs only allowed in one specific part pointed out as per our land maps, correct?
To you, Mr. Chair. So the provision is that CCAN's unlimited number are permitted in the airport noise restriction zone on Highway 3, properties fronting on Highway 3, which is the bulk of the zone. There are a few small parts, some along Chabot Road and some along Ellis Road that cover a few properties. And the difference, I think, was that the Highway 3 is the more commercial area, whereas the other areas are a little more residential and rural in nature, and that was the differentiation.
Thank you for answering my question. Is there any other comments from any other councilors? Councilor Nick Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and trying to sum up the last 2.5 years is difficult. And you know, for me, like, the biggest sticker was the sensitive environment area, and we removed that. And you know, I question the warden's point. We actually removed the extra legislation, so it is what it was in the last document. There is no extra protection for Big Pond at the present time. So we did increase laws around the lakes and residential zones to, you know, disperse housing a little bit to protect those lakes, but then we removed the bulk of the sensitive environment changes because it affected too many properties. So I do think there is holes that the MPS and LUB do not completely jive together to protect the environment the way that it should. That was a big part of why I voted no in October. And the community engagement piece was the other. Now, saying all that, I do feel that, you know, hearing the questions that we had last night, that for the most part, some of them have been addressed. The one specific thing around the planner, the one thing that people here asked for is that you needed the permission of the homeowner, and you do, you know, outside of a judge ordering that, you do. And it's not our law. You know, as much as I love Mr. Calhoun, I spoke to him several times. I was the one that brought it back to the table to get unlimited shipping containers on the airport stretch, which I strongly believe. I do think that to a certain point, shipping containers probably was brought in last minute, but I do think for the most part, it is now correct. I live in the well, if I don't live in it, I border it, the airport noise restriction zone. And to the point, the other point the warden made, the restrictions to the other part of that zone are because those people are residential, and I don't necessarily want 30 shipping containers next to my home because it would affect the value of my home. So I do think, although brought in last minute, we are getting closer on that topic. But really what it comes down to for me is the community engagement piece. I do believe that we probably, and I think this is a systemic problem, that there is no way to properly inform people these days. Last week I mailed out, I don't know, 500 flyers, you know, just advertising this meeting, no points specific. But I do believe that you're right. People have the right to know what's going on. But without some of the other conversations saying this would affect your rights, I'm not sure that people would have really realized what the renewal, it's not a new document, the renewal of the bylaw review was. And, you know, I appreciate the community being engaged and sharing that information. I did find on that flyer some of the statements to be, you know, not completely accurate. It's not a new document. There is lots of chances, maybe not to speak in a council meeting like this, because that's what Robert's rule states. It's not like a personal choice. And that, you know, that we, two and a half years ago, I was one of you. I ran because I wanted to make things better. This is not the seat that I thought I would be in. I ran because I was a volunteer that wanted to make Yarmouth better. And I actually believe, I don't think any of us really slept last night, but that for the most part, the questions are now being answered. And although I voted no, I'm struggling to figure out why I can still vote no, because I feel like the answers have come to the table for the most part. 90%
Councillor
of
Hilton,
the
please
answers.
address me. Mr.
Sure.
Chair.
Mr. Chair, you know, outside of windmills and maybe a couple sewer questions, I feel like in a question around recreation, I'm not sure if planning staff can identify what the difference between indoor recreation and outdoor recreation activities were, but I'm not sure what that question was from last night. But other than that, you know, dark skies, I too appreciate what was her name? Ann Jones stated last night. I do believe that you deserve peace and quiet in your own home. And I do believe this actually reduces restrictions. And I'm struggling to say that we haven't done that work in, you know, up until this meeting started. I really did want to vote no, just because I felt like community consultation could use another month. It could use another 2 months. But there isn't that many outlying issues that we can address with the document moving forward. And that pains me to say.
Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councillor Hilton has made a point about the C-cans on the airport stretch. And I think at the last council meeting or committee of the whole meeting, we did make a motion to address like, this isn't new. It was new at the time. We made a motion to have staff look into overlaying commercial zone in that area, especially up along the airport stretch, which you all know is the airport stretch as opposed, you know, Highway 3 or the airport stretch. And, you know, had it been able to work, that we could overlay the commercial zone, the containers would have been able to, would have went to unlimited anyway. So it's not, I agree with Nick, it's not really a brand new thing that just popped up. We asked for some clarification as to whether or not we could do this at the last meeting when we made that motion. So, you know, that truly is getting to be an industrial area. I mean, we're seeing it. We've got hotels, car dealerships, other businesses along that area. So it essentially is a commercial area. So, you know, it's just coming in with the same. We have a area out on the Hard Scratch Road that has container storage units in a commercial area, and so I don't have a problem with that anymore. I agree with Councillor Hilton again that this is a living document, and if it goes through, there are still places that can be changed if a problem arises. It's not a new document. I think 80 or 90% of it is still the same as what we've had. So, you know, a person mentioned earlier that maybe they thought we were trying to sell something, and I really wish that wasn't the case, because like many of us here, many of us, and I don't want to address the other, but I've lived here for my whole life, 53 years, and I live under the same rules, the same laws, the same policies as everyone in this room, as well as council. And any decision that is going to be made here not only affects the people that are out here in our community, but it affects people around this table as well. Like, there's no exceptions here. So when I ran for this, I didn't realize we were going to be doing this type of review. I didn't know this was even part of this 7 years ago. But any decisions I'm going to make, or any vote I'm going to make, is going to be based on what I've read and what I think is best for the municipality as a whole, not just my area, but as a whole. And yeah, as we move forward, I just, you know, we're still going to be part of this community. It's still going to be municipality of Yarmouth, and things are still going to happen. So hopefully development will continue to happen, and hopefully our community will thrive. Thank you.
Councillor Cushing, you had asked to speak again. You've already spoken twice. That would be council's decision whether they'd allow you to speak a third time. So I'm going to go around the table. Is there consensus that Councillor Cushing can speak again? Yeah, I have consensus. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You through to our council and our staff. There has been a number of revisions to the document that we've applied so far. And last night, you know, I acknowledge the voices that expressed some concerns about this bylaw. Councillor Hurlbert mentioned about every municipality have to have rules, and I know that the council has a right to revise bylaws. However, again, from what I heard last night, will council put this back on the back burner about some of the questions that were asked last night, some of the concerns that were asked last night, or will we take it and review the revisions that were addressed last night and discuss to see if we can add them in? Again, we can't please everybody, and again, as a lot of the councillors mentioned, that I'm not here to get elected next year, or next year it is. I'm here to represent the municipality, but I am also here to listen to the concerns of the citizens, and somehow we got to address them concerns. And we certainly talked about the communication part of it, letting the citizens know of the municipality when public meetings are coming up, and make sure that they have an opportunity to participate. So, thank you, Mr. Warden.
Is there any more comments or concerns? I didn't see any more hands. Councillor Sherry Hurlbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder what we would be doing if we don't pass this and move forward. I'm not sure what that would look like. I'm not sure if any new regulations or changes to regulations would bring out a different group of people to not be happy with those, bring out the same group of people who still might not be happy with those. The challenge is that we are living with a document that we know isn't perfect, and that we, the 7 of us, might not agree on some of those things. We know that. And to Councillor Cushing's point, and I'm glad we let him speak on that, because it made me think, you know, about if we know that there are things that can be changed, then we as council need to be putting those on the committee of the whole agenda, and have those individual, or maybe it's a group of things, or like-minded, like things that we can have those discussions on and improve on. I think that that's fair. A couple of months ago, I did make a motion to have staff investigate how we can better engage the public. And I've known for the 3 years that I've been here that is a challenge. It's a challenge within this particular venue. It was a challenge trying to get community members involved in sitting on committees. We had a brand new accessibility advisory committee, and we struggled with trying to find people who would help us plan out what was best for the municipality when it comes to accessibility. We struggle with getting people to participate But what we don't struggle with is when there is, in my opinion, sometimes misinformation and people not reading the document. And last night there were people who said, I haven't read this document, but I'm going to stand in front of a microphone and I'm going to talk about something I admit I haven't read. I've read the document, and I can admit that I don't understand every single thing, but I strive to ensure that moving forward, that we make those changes to the things we know we can make changes to. I think that we can always do better. We can always listen more. We can make sure we read the documents and we ask the questions. And I feel like sometimes I ask the same question repeatedly, and especially in this process, because I want to understand what we have done, where we have come from, and where we're moving to. We've said it over and over, I think it's a fallacy to think that we can please everyone. My original statement was, we have people who want less rules. We have people who want more rules. And we have a group of people who want more rules and less rules. So I don't know how to navigate that part. I no idea how you make the rule so that the person who wants the rule but doesn't want the rule, same person, how we make them understand that can't happen. It has to be one way or the other, right? Maybe there is a balance. Maybe there is something that we can do. But I think that I know that I was elected to represent everyone, not just the residents in District 3, everyone in this municipality. And of the 250-ish people who showed up here tonight, there are many more who didn't show up. So that would lead me to think that they're okay. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're a part of those people who didn't know this was happening. Maybe they were.
Quiet, please.
But I think that moving forward, we can do a better job at communication. We can figure out how to do a better job at communicating. And we can put on the table some of those things that we know do need to be changed. But I don't think we need to throw this entire document out and start again. Thank you.
There was one more thing, or just one more quick thing that I wanted to say, Councillor Hurlbert. You had said that we can't please everyone, and it's kind of ironic that you said that. And I'm going to refer to an old colleague who used to report on meetings and stuff, Gary Nickerson. One of the first things he ever said to me is, you might be lucky if you can please half the people half the time, and maybe once in that whole discussion you'll please yourself. And that's actually kind of important. Councillor Nick Hilton, you had already spoke twice. I'm going to have to go around the table for consensus. Councillor Hilton, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a question to the planners on process. So if this document is accepted, normally we challenge them when an application is put in. Can we challenge things within that document through council or through PAC as an ongoing process? Like if community submits the same questions they've been having, can that letter be sent or that question be sent to council or PAC for their review?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So planning documents, they're council's documents, and it's your power to amend them. That can come as a result of an application from a property owner or whatever. It can also come out of your own initiative. If there's an issue you see with the documents that you want addressed, you can add that to the staff work plan. And actually the municipal planning strategy has policies in it that encourage council to do a regular review. There's the 10-year that you're mandated by the province. You have to review it in full every 10 years, but there's actually policy that's in this plan encouraging you to do a housekeeping review within 2 years to catch any. I'm not perfect. There's going to be errors, to correct those and to check in on issues that you need to correct.
Thank you, Ian. And just one final statement. Like I feel like the last 4 to 6 years has been difficult. I work in the healthcare field. We're overrun with clients. We tired, we're stressed, and I feel like I've seen that in the community lately. And the questions, the statements that I took from last night the most is how do we, mitigate future costs to our children? How do we make life easier moving forward? And that's what I'm going to take from this process. And I do believe that some of the changes do that. I do believe that as a counselor, as a council, we've been very, very engaged in the process, to be honest. And it's been a lengthy one. I'm not going to tell you that I don't, I don't make the decisions, to get your vote, but I'm not going to tell you I don't want to be reelected, because I like being informed on the issues, and I like being here to represent the people in my area. I would say at least 10 or 15 of you live in Chibouque, and I would say, in District 7, and I would say that looking around the room, it's equally split on if you want more regulations and if you want less. So it's not an easy decision, but for the most part, and knowing that we can continue to work on that, and if you send questions in a letter form or whatever addressed to council, that they can go to PAC or to council to be addressed, this process can keep moving. And as much as I thought could vote no, I don't. You guys have solved those questions from last night, the majority of those answers. I don't know how I can possibly do it.
Councillor Durkee's asked to speak a third time. Is consensus? Actually, not by policy. Well, Councillor Durkee, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I need to say a huge thank you to council, to our community, and to staff who have worked really tirelessly on this MPS LUB. It has not been easy. It's not an easy decision. I agree with what other councillors have said, that we're mixed in terms of people who feel this is the right thing to do or this is the wrong thing to do. I have to repeat again that if we don't move this forward, then we just revert to the present MPS LUB. It's not like we have nothing. This is a hard time for everybody. We have terrible things happening in the world right now that affects more people than you can imagine. We've had difficulties, we've had COVID, our inflation, we've had awful things. And this is not easy, but for our people, we have to make decisions that will move us in the right direction and think of our future and try and keep things going. And I'm pleased that, this document is a living document, and it's not like it ends here. We will continue, as we always have, with a PAC and development coming forward. And if people have questions, they will be answered. And I think that's really important, that people know that we are listening and we hear and we are making changes then that we have to make that will benefit everybody. I look forward to moving forward. Thanks.
Any more comments? If not, I'd entertain a question on the motion on the floor. Question being called on the motion. Signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Opposed? A vote of 5-2. The motion is carried. Councillor Christian, would you like your name recorded? So would not. Thank you, Council. Thank you very much for the discussion, and thank you for all the respectful comments that were put forward on the table. This is the end of the agenda. I call this meeting closed.